Hello everyone, this is Ken Elsoff, and this is the course that I put together for the Facebook group. Everybody voted on a subject that they wanted me to prep an instructional course for, and the vote was for negotiating federal salary and other benefits, and this is for new hires specifically. This is not for current federal employees who have already been who already work for the federal government and who are trying to get other positions and reassignments in the federal government. This is when you're coming in off the street into the federal government. You have a little bit more leverage in what you can negotiate when you're a brand new employee coming in to the federal government than what you can once you're already in and taking another position. So I'm going to cover a number of different subjects that you can actually negotiate for when you're getting hired. Now, keep in mind that just because you can negotiate for these things, it doesn't mean that you're going to be told yes. You can ask for things like a higher salary, but they can always tell you no. You're not legally guaranteed to get anything higher than what they initially offered you. But I'm sharing this presentation to let you know that you can ask for more, and oftentimes it is granted. But a lot of folks don't realize that you can negotiate these federal salaries and federal benefits and things like that. So that's the point of the presentation, which is yes, you can ask for these things, although they may tell you no. So we're going to cover negotiating your salary. We're going to cover negotiating the leave or vacation earning rate, your start date, your work schedule, recruitment incentives, moving expenses, the difference between relocation incentives, which are lump sums, and relocation moving expenses, education debt reduction program, SLRP, which is student loan repayments, teleworking, and alternative work schedules. Who am I and why should you listen to me? I'm Ken Elsoff, as I said before. I'm a former GS-12 HR specialist. I worked in recruitment and placement for about 9 years as a federal recruiter for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and then later the Department of Defense. So I've got 9 years of experience bringing people into the federal government. So I was the guy behind the scenes of USA Jobs. I was the guy who built the USA Jobs announcements and then collected resumes from that portal, screened them, connected people with supervisors, and set up interviews, sometimes participated in interviews, and then held people's hands, new hires' hands, through the hiring process until they started. So I've got exposure to the full realm of recruitment activities from the federal HR side. I'm also a Navy veteran, which really was the point of putting together the group, to help educate veterans on how to better increase their chances of getting a federal position. A lot of veterans aren't properly trained in how to write a resume and answer questionnaires and respond to KSA questions and things like that. So this is really designed to help veterans. I'm also the founder of the Facebook group, Veteran to Federal Government Jobs, and then I put US in parentheses behind it because I was getting a lot of requests from India. Citizens of India like federal jobs, and so they were trying to get into this group quite a bit. So this is for American veterans. So I'm racing through these materials kind of quickly because I have a lot to cover, and this video needs to be a certain length in order for it to be uploaded into YouTube. Otherwise it can take a long time and lock up the accounts. So I've got to make this a fast video, but you're welcome to obviously rewatch it numerous times if you want. The link to this YouTube video is going to be secured. That means that anyone who searches YouTube will not be able to find it. You'll actually need the link to the direct video in order to be able to watch it, because it will be secured and hidden from public viewing. The reason is I'm making this video especially for the members of the Facebook group who have been really generous with helping out and answering questions and contributing knowledge and submitting files to the files section that are helpful documents and things like that. So this video is really my thank you to you guys for helping to make the group successful, making it a fun group and making it an interactive group. A lot of Facebook groups out there are a waste of time, and I think this one is valuable, and hopefully I can repay some of that, the value you guys bring to the table with by providing some value in this presentation. So I'm going to jump right in now, and I'm going to discuss salary, negotiating your salary. That seems to be the big one that everybody wants to know about. So let's tackle that one first. So negotiating salaries, the question that I get most often was, can you negotiate a federal salary? Yes, the answer is yes, clearly. Otherwise, I wouldn't have put this presentation together for you guys. But but it does depend. You may not, again, you're not going to be guaranteed to get it, but often, yes, you can. In most GS and wage grade positions, yes, you can negotiate. So that's the answer. But again, it's not guaranteed. Having come from the VA, I do wanted to make a note that in many of the medical related occupations in the VA, your pay is actually set by a professional standards board of your peers based on your experience and education levels. So you can't negotiate those because it's set by a sort of a third party panel. But the point is, yes, you can negotiate your salaries. So when you do get a federal job offer, it is appropriate for you to ask for a higher salary when that offer comes in. So the second question that I get most often is, when is the best time to start negotiating for your salary? Now, some folks will tell you that you should postpone your salary negotiations until you're offered the job, meaning when you get a job offer with the federal government, normally it is a tentative offer, meaning it is not a full job offer. They're merely letting you know that you've been selected and giving you a heads up that you now need to jump through a bunch of other pre-employment hoops before they can give you a final and firm offer. Those hoops might be background checks, it might getting your fingerprints done, or getting a medical physical if your job requires that. And so some people will tell you to wait until you've jumped through all those hoops and until they give you the final and firm offer to ask for a higher salary, or to ask if they're going to negotiate with you. Some of the people will tell you that you should do it on the initial phone call and actually bring it up during the tentative job offer as soon as you hear from them. It really depends, and there's no clear-cut answer to that. I've had people do both. They asked for a higher salary both during the tentative offer and then later on down the road during the final and firm offer. I don't really have any advice for you, frankly, because both of them worked. It was a yes or no. It began the discussion. So from my perspective, it didn't matter where you asked for this higher salary when you asked for this higher salary. It could have been any time during the hiring process. So I've seen it all work, and I've seen it the answer be yes and the answer be no in both instances. So I don't have any advice for you. That's going to have to be your call. But I do want to note that you don't want to bring up money during the interview. Don't try to negotiate during a job interview. And the reason is because they haven't selected you yet. You don't know if they're even going to hire you. So it's silly to even bring up money during the interview. And I've seen people try to do it, and it makes them look foolish when they do that. It's nothing you want to do. It's sort of embarrassing yourself if you do that. Wait until they actually contact you after the interview to say that you've got the job, or at least that you're going to have the job as soon as you clear all these additional hurdles. Okay, so remember, this is only applicable for new hires because once you're a current federal employee, you cannot negotiate your salary. Once you're inside the federal government, anytime you get a promotion or a demotion or relocate to a new geographic area, the pay setting determinations are actually laid out in regulations. So once you're inside, you can't negotiate those your federal salary. It's a formula that exists for federal employees. That's why it's advantageous to do it up front when you're first getting hired into the government. When they do call you to offer you a job, in some cases you might apply for a job that is a GS11 or a GS12 or a GS12. So you could be getting a job offer at one grade level or another when they advertised for multiple grade levels. So always make sure that you're asking when they call you for an offer what grade level you're being offered the job at, whether it's a GS11 or a GS12, for example. You can also ask the person who makes the offer to send you a copy of the pay chart that they're using. Different agencies have different pay charts, and even different occupations inside the same agency may have different pay charts. And so what you want to do is, and different pay charts exist around the country depending on what geographic area you're in. So the first thing you need to do is ask the person who offered you the job to send you a copy of the pay chart that they're using for that particular area and your particular job, and actually have them email it to you so you can take a look at it. I'm going to cover that a little bit more here in just a second, but first I do want to highlight to you when management will not negotiate salary. There are a number of reasons why they won't negotiate, or they'll just simply say no, we're not going to, or in some cases no, we can't. Some of those instances might be when there is no budget to bring a new employee in at a higher amount. Each department will have its own budget and it will have to manage its own employees' salaries within that budget. So if there's simply no money to bring somebody in at a higher rate, then they can simply tell you no. In some cases, if you're, for example, a fresh or recent college graduate and you have no professional experience, then they're likely to say no for giving you a higher salary because you're brand new. You're not bringing a whole a long-term, well-balanced skill set to the table. You're brand new. You're a trainee essentially, so they're not going to negotiate with you if you're brand new most of the time. In the event that there were a lot of other applicants, they won't negotiate with you, because if a lot of people applied for the job and they offered you the entry-level salary and you tell them that you won't take the job unless they give you a higher amount, well, that's okay to them because they will just simply go on to applicant number 2. When they have 20, 30, 100 people applying for the same job, they don't need to negotiate because there are plenty of applicants who will accept that lower salary and therefore not impact their budget. So there is no incentive to negotiate when there are a whole bunch of applicants. I've also seen agencies, or managers rather, not negotiate with an employee or with a new hire who is currently unemployed. If you are unemployed and you are coming into the government, there is not a whole lot of leverage for you to use to get a higher salary. For the most part, there are exceptions, but I'm telling you that for the most part, they see you as making zero salary dollars now, and therefore you should be willing to accept the lowest starting salary in the government because you're currently making $0. So if you're unemployed, you lost a little bit of leverage in trying to negotiate your salary, although if you were previously employed for many, many years and you've got a lot of certifications, they may still do it. Sometimes a manager will just simply say, no, we're not going to negotiate with you, and it's really a bluff. They want to see if you're going to back out or turn down the position. It's a dirty game to play, but I've seen it done. It does exist, and I don't support it, but sometimes they'll just simply tell the HR specialist, tell this applicant, no, we're not going to negotiate with them, and we'll see what they do. And if they withdraw from consideration, then come back and then we'll consider negotiating at that point. So sometimes it's a bluff to see if you'll hold your ground or if you'll back out. Most people, when I encountered this situation, when we said no, we won't negotiate, they said that's fine. I want the job anyways, and then we just proceeded to give them the lower salary because they didn't provide any counter negotiations, so to speak. If it's a lower graded position, a GS5 type position or GS6, I've rarely seen supervisors negotiate higher salaries for those type of positions at that grade level. Normally salaries are negotiated when somebody is coming to the table with a whole bunch of experience that's specialized for a particular career field, and that is at a higher grade level. So most often GS11 and above is where supervisors were more likely to negotiate because they were bringing in people at higher grade levels with a specific skill set that they were after, and therefore they were more likely to negotiate. So that isn't to say that you can't get a higher salary when you're applying for GS5 and 6 positions. It's just that I didn't see it very often. In fact, it was pretty rare altogether. So those are just a few of the reasons why they might tell you. So when will they negotiate? Well, as I said before, they often will negotiate if you possess a special need of the agency, and you're bringing a specific skill set to the table. They'll also negotiate when there are a few candidates, if they have a hard time recruiting or it's a hard to fill position, meaning that very few people apply who are actually qualified for the job. When there are 3 or 4, maybe even 5 applicants who get an interview, at that point there are so few applicants that they're more likely to negotiate salary to get you in because it's proving to be a hard to recruit position to fill. And so the fourth bullet point is really, I think I copied and pasted that from OPM's website, where they basically say if you meet superior qualifications and offer a special need that the government is seeking, then they do have the authority to appoint a newly appointed employee at positions above step 1, which is up to step 10. And I'm going to show you a sample pay chart here in a second, so that makes a little bit more sense to you. And then of course, if you want to learn more, you can visit 5 CFR 531.212, and if you throw that into Google, the 5 CFR 531, put that into Google and it will bring up the websites that will it'll show you the federal regulations that are basically reiterating to you the things that I'm trying to convey right now. Alright, so here are some things that you need to know before negotiating. You want to know what pay chart they're using when they made you the offer. Where did they get that salary from? Where's the pay chart that they used to make the offer to you? And normally what you'll do is you'll ask the person who offered you the job if they can send you a copy or send you a link to the pay chart that they're using, whether you're a GS or a WG employee. You also want to be familiar with step increases. These are the time frames in between the steps that you're going to have once you're inside the federal government and on a pay chart. And I'm going to show that to you right now, so that makes a little bit more sense. And the reason you want to know that is because you can actually use that to your advantage in determining how many years of experience you're bringing to the table relative to how many years of experience or what step you would be on if you had started that many years ago in the federal government. What step would you be at today? And translate those number of years of experience that you have onto the pay chart in the federal government, and that will tell you right about where you would be had you started in the federal government at the same time you began your career. And that's a good number to shoot for when you're negotiating. And that I'll explain that here in just a second. I'm going to go bring up a pay chart so that I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. So I've just gone over to Google and I've typed in OPM pay charts. What that will do is that'll allow you to select the top option right here, where it's discussing the 2007 general schedule locality pay tables. I'm pulling these up only as a visual example, but again, you may have a different pay chart that you're using. If you, for example, got hired into a WG job, wage grade job, and you'll know that from the announcement. So here are all of the GS pay charts across the country depending on the geographic region, and I'm just going to pull one up randomly. I'm going to pick this one here, Laredo, Texas, and I'm going to click on the PDF file and we're going to open that up. So here's an example of a federal pay chart. When I'm discussing grade level, I'm discussing 1 through 15. These are the GS grade levels. You can be a GS2, a GS5, GS11, GS15. Okay, going across the top are the different steps. These are actually showing you what you will earn as you continue to serve in the federal government. Going from one step to another is typically a result of being in the position for a year or 2 or 3. And so what I mean by that is, let's say for example that you come into the government as a GS7 step 1. This is going to be your salary. Okay, after 1 year of service, on your 1-year anniversary, you're going to get an increase and bumped up to step 2, and your salary is going to be that. Same with here. So the difference is that there is a 1-year waiting period between here, here, and here. And so when you serve after 1 year, you're going to make this much. After 2 years, you'll make this much. After 3 years, you make this much. And now the pay chart actually changes to where you have to wait a 2-year period before you jump up. So now now you'll make this much money for 2-year period, and then after 2 years you'll go here, 2 years here, and 2 years here. At this point, it jumps up to 3 years. You've got to wait 3 years now before you jump up to step 8, 3 years to step 9, and 3 years to step 10. So what that's saying is when you first get hired into the federal government as a step 1, if you stay at GS7 for a period of time, it's going to take you 18 years to get up to step 10. 18 years of service, because you have 1 year in between these first ones, 2 years in between these, and 3 years in between these last ones. A total of 18 years to go from step 1 to step 10. Now, the reason that is significant is because if you want to negotiate your salary, and let's say that you've been working in your career field for 10 years, you've got 10 years of experience, it would make sense then that you can argue as a GS7 step 1, if I had started 10 years ago, I would have been in for 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 8 years. So the 10-year period that you would have right in between the 10 years of experience that you have, if you had started at GS7 step 1 10 years ago, would land you somewhere around here. Meaning if you had been in the federal government for the last 10 years and stayed put, this is where your salary would be, and this is where your salary this is a good place for you to try to negotiate. So if I had 10 years of experience and I was being offered a GS7 step 1, I would come to this pay chart and I would count how far down on the steps, across the steps, would I be if I had 10 years of experience at this grade level. And I would land somewhere around step 6 or step 7, and probably I would just shoot for step 7 and tell the specialist who's offering me the job, hey, listen, I've got 10 years of experience. That to me equates to right around step 7, 49,000, and that's where I would like my starting salary to be. They may counter with something less, which is fine, but they may also agree with you and give you that amount. Now, if they give you that amount, that's just about $8,000 more than what you would have been given if you had accepted step 1. That puts you $8,000 ahead of the game for the rest of your career. You're going to start from this point, and you've just saved yourself 10 years of advancement. And that's why it's important to know how many years you have to wait between each step when you're negotiating your salary, because it gives you a valid reason to ask for an amount like this. And that explains, hopefully, what this slide was trying to get at in the beginning, which is you need to know what pay chart you're working off of, and you need to know the time frames in between the step increases so you can use that to validate exactly how far you should be on the steps. So what are some strategies that you can use? One of the things you can do is present your current pay stub to them and say, hey, listen, I make this many dollars a year in my current job, and what you're offering me is less than that. I can't take a pay cut to come to the government. Can you at least match or beat what I'm currently at? Here's a copy of my pay stub. Now that's incentive, that's leverage for you to justify to the supervisor why it is you need to come in at a higher salary, because they can't expect you to take a pay cut to come into a new job. In some cases, we've actually had people present offer letters from other organizations that are competing with us. And if they can prove to us that they have an offer on the table from another employer that's at a specific amount, the employee can then, or the selectee can then ask us to meet it or slightly beat it so that we can get the employee on our side. So I've actually seen current offer letters used in negotiations before. The third bullet point is what I was covering just a second ago on the pay chart, which is where would you be stepwise if you had started in the federal government X number of years ago, however many years you've got. It's obvious that when you can negotiate your salary when you're very highly qualified for a position. If you have a number of high-level degrees or certifications in a particular field that are hard to come by, then that gives you leverage to negotiate and demand a higher salary, or request a higher salary. You don't want to demand it, you want to request it. The number of years of experience, the more experience you have, the more likely they are to negotiate with you. And in some cases, the more specialized military experience you have, or even having worked in the military and with federal civilians, you're going to be familiar with the federal government's way of doing business. Okay, I'm moving on now to negotiating your vacation earning rate. The general statement relative to this is creditable service for annual leave accrual for non-federal work experience. If you're not familiar with those words and it sounds a little foreign to you, that's okay. But it's basically saying that in the federal government, you earn vacation rates you earn vacation at different rates according to how many years of service you have. And the groupings of years is basically something like this. 1 to 3 years of experience in the government, you'll earn 4 hours of vacation time every 2 weeks. From 3 years to 15 years of service, you're going to earn vacation at a rate of 6 hours every 2 weeks. And then once you hit the 15-year mark of federal service, your earning rate jumps up to 8 hours. Now this is for a standard GS employee. Different occupations have different leave earning rates, such as nurses have their own, I believe, and physicians, if I recall correctly. They have their own leave earning rates as well. But just keep in mind that you can actually start out ahead by negotiating it, by asking for it. If, for example, you have 6 years of military service, you can request that they give you 6 years of credit for your creditable service for non-federal work experience. And normally when you're in the military, if you've got military experience, they'll give this to you automatically. You really don't need to ask for it. But if you are coming in from the civilian sector, you still can ask for it and say, hey, I've got 10 years of experience. I would like to have 10 years. I would like to be moved forward on the vacation earning rates into the second group, which is 3 to 15 years. So that you can earn 6 hours of vacation time every 2 weeks. This is, again, for non-federal work experience, and it does include the uniformed services, but it's actually saying that here, the third bullet point, that the amount of service credited may be up to the actual amount of service during which the employee performed duties related to the position. That basically means if you have 10 years of experience, they can give you 10 years of experience towards your vacation earning rate. A lot of people don't know this. So this is, from my standpoint and my experience, a lot of people don't know this and didn't know that they could ask for this, and they really kind of shot themselves in the foot because they could have moved ahead on the clock if they had only asked for a higher leave group when they first got the job offer. Now, the three bullet points at the bottom, the USCs and CFRs, those are points of reference that you can use to Google. Throw those into Google and it'll bring up the regulations which tell you that the government can move you up in your vacation earning rate based on experience that you had before coming into the government. Negotiating your start date, you can, this is probably the most commonly negotiated part of the hiring process, which is picking what day you're going to start. In some instances, they need you to start right away, and in other instances, they can wait months before you actually begin working. And it's done in pay periods typically, which are every 2 weeks, and it can be, the difference can be how much time you need to give to your current employer versus or relative to amount of time it may take you to find a new home if you're relocating across the United States or from overseas to take a position. Clearly, they're going to need to give you time to house hunt and get your goods relocated before they can expect you to start. So in that case, it's unreasonable for them to ask you to start 2 weeks from now when you obviously have a family to move or a house to sell and things like that. So start dates are generally pretty flexible. If one doesn't work for you, sometimes they'll give you a hard and fast, firm start date, and they will not negotiate it, and that's up to them. It's their call. So if they tell you no, you don't have any recourse. You just simply have to report for duty on that day that they asked you to. You can also negotiate your work schedule, and that might be what days you work, what shift you work, whether you are allowed to flex. And what flex means basically is you have an established shift, tour of duty. And if you want to come in an hour early and leave an hour early on the same day, that's allowed. Or come in an hour late and leave an hour late that day, it's allowed. That's what flex is. You can also often negotiate for compressed tours of duty, which basically is something along the lines of, in the civilian sector, it would be 4 10-hour days where you work 10 hours a day, Monday through Thursday, and then you get Friday off. So you have a 3-day weekend every weekend. It's actually a little bit more complicated when people are doing that in the government. Although those shifts do exist, it can be compressed tours can be a little bit different and a little bit more complex and beyond the scope of this presentation. But the point is to know that it exists and that you can ask for it and at least feel them out for their flexibilities prior to accepting the position or starting the job, knowing that you can negotiate these things. You want to familiarize yourself with the pay and leave reference materials. There is a handbook on alternative work schedules. These are things that you can actually plug these sentences into and search them, and it'll bring up a number of different resources for you. The bottom one here is just going over leave, pay and leave policy on OPM's website, but you can actually just Google OPM alternative work schedules and have it actually bring up the information that you need to explore these. Now, they will not always negotiate work schedules with you, but it is important that you go back to the announcement that you applied for and read it to see what work schedules were on the announcement. If there were multiple work schedules on the announcement, then you can actually talk to them about which ones you're going to work and see if you can negotiate those. If it's a straight schedule that's listed on the announcement, then you may not be able to negotiate it much. There may not be room for that, but just know that you can ask for it. So it's something to consider. But the whole point of it is that it's different from the basic 40-hour work week. And it is important. The government does know and acknowledge that it's important to have work-family balance, and that they are flexible in many departments, they are flexible on work schedules. Some aren't, but some are. Just know that you can actually request them. And then here are some more resources for you. So negotiating recruitment incentives. An agency may pay a recruitment incentive to a newly appointed employee if the agency has determined that the position is likely to be difficult to fill in the absence of an incentive. Okay, a recruitment incentive is when they pay you money. They give you a lump sum of money, typically $3 or $5 or $10,000 lump sum payment to help pay for you to relocate, to help recruit people into hard to fill positions. So this is a recruitment incentive and not a relocation incentive, although they are both just lump sums of money. A recruitment incentive may be as much as 25% of the employee's annual rate of basic pay multiplied by the number of years of service in the service periods. So for example, if they want to give you a recruitment incentive, they can actually say, if you go to them and say you want a recruitment incentive, they can counter and say, yes, we'll give it to you if you sign an agreement saying that you'll stay put for at least 3 years. That's what this is saying. So you can get up to 25% of your salary times the number of years you agree to stay there. In some cases, they will negotiate that for really, really high amounts, but it's often really high on the GS pay scale. I've never seen them negotiate that high of a recruitment incentive with anyone who was under a GS, I think 14. So GS 14s and 15s would get that much, but the average employee who's GS 13 or below may only get 1 year service agreement in exchange for a partial recruitment incentive. So although they have some flexibilities on that, getting a large amount of money is typically reserved for the higher level GS employees. They do have a cap on recruitment incentives, and it can be raised with approval. But again, that I've never seen that happen. You're talking about a lot of money at that point, and they've recently begun to kind of restrict their use of recruitment incentives because of budget issues. So I've never seen that done where they actually break the cap with OPM approval. There are some resources for you at the bottom you can Google and learn a little bit more. So there is another type of incentive get for relocating, which is it's typically called relocation expenses, meaning that they're going to cover all of your costs of relocation. Now that's different from a lump sum that's flat fee and you have to work within that budget. In this case, this is more similar to a military PCS move where you pay to move your family and then the government reimburses you for all of those expenses. That's different from a recruitment or relocation incentive where they just simply give you a flat fee and you have to make it work. That's typically only used when you have to move, by the way, to a new geographic area. So this relocation incentive lump sum, this is where they give you a flat $5,000, for example, to move, and then you've got to make your move fall within that budget or cover the costs out of pocket for any overage. This is not a full PCS move. This is different from that. That was on the last slide. This is just a lump sum to help cover your relocation expenses. Okay, so the last three slides have been recruitment incentive and then a PCS move, which is where they cover all your expenses. And now we're looking at relocation incentive, which is a lump sum to relocate. You can get a recruitment incentive and you can also have your move paid for. If it says in the announcement, you'll want to review the announcement to say that the recruitment incentives or relocation incentives have been authorized. The VA actually has its own education debt reduction program for medical personnel. It's rare, but it does exist, and this would not apply to anybody applying for jobs other than the VA, and outside of that, other than positions other than medical related positions. But this just helps medical professionals repay their student loans. So if you are a nurse or a doctor and you're applying for a position with the federal government, with the VA specifically, make sure you scroll down in the announcement and see if EDRP is approved or authorized for the position, because if it's listed in the announcement, then there's a good chance you can get some of your student loans repaid from medical school and nursing school. Telework is another benefit that you can request. Some employees are allowed to perform the work at an approved alternative work site. So there are generally two types of telework, okay, which is routine telework as part of an ongoing regular schedule, and then situational telework when it's approved on a case-by-case basis. So some people telework once a week throughout the year. In other cases, you may be approved for telework that is not regularly scheduled. It may be whenever there's a blizzard, for example, and you're not your supervisor doesn't want you driving out on slippery roads. They can authorize you to telework that particular day. You can learn a little bit more about telework by going to telework.gov. Most of the time in announcements, it'll actually say in there whether or not a position is approved for telework when you're first applying, or when it may say also that telework may be authorized. So at that point, it's worth bringing up and asking when you can start teleworking and where that can be from. Another student loan repayment program that the government offers is the SLRP, which is what we call it for short. Most of the time now, they're actually putting in the announcement that student loan repayment may be authorized for this position. When you see that, that's a green light for you to ask for it, because they can actually repay your federally insured student loans as a recruitment or a retention incentive for candidates and actually for current employees. This is one of those benefits that you can negotiate when you're a current employee moving to a new position. The government allows you to be paid up to $60,000 in student loan repayments. That's your lifetime maximum. Typically, they give you $10,000 per year for up to 6 years, and you have to agree to stay there for a period of time in order to get that money. So basically, if you want $30,000, that's $10,000 a year. That would be 3 years, and they'll therefore make you sign a 3-year service agreement, meaning you have to stay put. If they give you that $30,000 for your student loans, you've got to agree to remain in that position for 3 years. And then you can do it again once that 3 years is up, repeat the process for a maximum of $60,000. In the event that you are getting student loan repayment and you resign or get fired from the federal government in the middle of that agreement, they can make you pay back that money that they had cut you for, that they had sent you for repaying your student loans. So be mindful of that. That's very important. If you want to learn more, those are the resources at the bottom, the 5 UFC resources for you to explore some more. But again, you want to make sure you're reading the announcement to see if the position is approved for student loan repayment. Okay, so remember, each agency is different. In some cases, you want to ask what you can negotiate for. It's not their job to tell you what you can get. It's your job to ask for it, and I've had people demand it. People have told me I will not take this job unless you give me step 5 or step 8 on the pay scale, in addition to student loan repayment, in addition to relocation assistance, or moving expenses, or a lump sum. So it's important to ask. If you are curious about any of these things when you first get a job offer, do not hesitate to ask for these things. They exist and they can be negotiated, and if you're lucky, you can get a number of them to say, or you can get the supervisor to agree to award you a number of these things here. So to review, we discussed negotiating salaries, your vacation earning rates, your start dates, your work schedule, recruitment incentives, moving expenses, relocation incentives, education debt reduction, SLRP, telework, and alternative work schedules. This was a very, very quick presentation on these particular items. Now, that's why I put the resources for you to go Google them and research them on your own on the bottom of each slide, so that you can actually go learn more. But now that you know that it is possible to negotiate these things, you're, I think, better educated and now in a better position to get more benefits and in some cases more pay for yourself at the beginning of your federal career, rather than waiting until later on to learn that you could have negotiated these things back when you started. So hopefully this gives you some ideas on what to ask for when you're getting federal job offers. And that is the presentation for now. I hope I didn't go too fast. I hope it was easily understood. I know I stuttered in a few places, but I think the gist of what I was trying to get across did come through. So I think that this should be a tremendously helpful program for you. Now, if you have any questions on this, head back over to the Facebook group and post the questions publicly. And if I can, I'll answer them. If I can, I will answer them, but if I get a number of questions on a particular subject that I didn't cover well enough, I can re-record this presentation and include that stuff in there if you guys think that this was lacking in certain details. But again, I was kind of under the gun. I wanted to get this out. Time won't allow you to go too far in depth on all these things, so there is going to be a little bit of individual research and initiative on your part to look into this a little bit further. But I will do what I can, and if needed, I will re-record this with additional relevant content. So thank you very much for watching. I hope it was helpful. Go out there and do well. Thanks, everybody.